Hello and welcome to the Pay It Forward podcast, where we get in conversations with payment experts from around the world. This podcast is sponsored by Payable, and we're filming live right here at the Reflex Festival in Cyprus. I'm Fiona McFarlane, and for this episode, we're going to be diving into some European payment insight with a Dutch kick, because joining me is none other than Mr. Daniel van Delft, who is the CEO of the Amsterdam-based payment solution Currence.
That's correct, and thank you for having me.
No, the pleasure, Daniel, is all mine. Now, without further ado, like I said earlier, I've had the pleasure of living in the Netherlands, so I know Currence's products and I've had the chance to use them. But for those listeners who are not so lucky, would you mind giving a big, fat introduction on Currence and, of course, yourself as their CEO?
Yeah, sure. Let me start then with bringing a little bit of light into iDeal, and then onto myself. iDeal is the leading eComm payment brand in the Netherlands. It's account-to-account based. Was only launched back in 2005. A very early adapter of account-to-account payments, and a little bit the open banking avant la lettre, as we tend to call it now, because we were not actually aware that we were building that at the time. Meanwhile, grown in different segments in the Netherlands. So as a Dutch consumer, you obviously know it, but as a foreign consumer, unfortunately not yet. But from a merchant side, from a acquiring side, is also one of the reasons why I'm here, because Payable is an acquirer of the iDeal scheme in the Netherlands, so for Dutch consumers, but also for Dutch consumers actually transacting outside of the Netherlands. So meanwhile, we've grown in several segments up to more than 1.3 billion transactions yearly, from P2P to pure eComm, and everything is what's actually in between, but also into face-to-face or point of sale. Not so much yet, but charity payments, QR code payments are our daily bread and butter. And what we also have done recently is that we have renewed the scheme to make it, from a consumer perspective, even more seamless. And now back to me. So I'm the CEO since 2 years and a bit, but have been on that journey already since 2005, but with a little bit of distance, because I was one of the launching banks at the time in 2005.
Of
so I'm
course.
already old.
Of course, because Currence is actually a multi-bank initiative
It
originally.
is, yeah. And meanwhile, let's say over all those years, I haven't been on the iDeal side so close. I've been their strict competitor as well, because I've worked for Visa 11 years in between. But the nice banks, the nice shareholders asked me back and said, guys, you really are the right person actually to bring iDeal and Currence in the next phase. But maybe also just a little bit of clarification. iDeal is the payment scheme, Currence is the holding company. And we do our own as well some additional schemes, specifically also an identity scheme called iDeal, making use of the same rails, but then for your digital identity.
Very true. Are there any other products or licenses that Currence offers?
Yes, we do. So we also have an e-mandate license program there, but that's kind of more a service product towards our banking community. Really working well, and we really are pushing this forward. But other than that, I have to say that we are decreasing the scope of Currence Holding currently, as the so-called physical mandates, Accept Giro, an additional scheme, we just phased out.
Okay.
And we are also looking at how we can actually bring e-mandates to a next level, but probably with another partner.
Okay, well, very exciting. Thank you for giving me the overview. Now, of course, this is a Pay It Forward podcast where I speak to payment experts from around the world. You are the perfect candidate to give me a flavor of the Dutch payment ecosystem with its pros and cons. Would you mind taking it away?
Yeah, definitely, yes. Just slightly over 20 years experience in payments, so from all sides, so from the credit card side to pure account to account, which I'm actually managing now with a great team. Looking at the Netherlands, I think it's not well known that we are really well digitized already. So you can compare us better with the Scandinavian market, so for example with Sweden, in terms of digital nativeness versus Germany, although that's our direct neighbor. So looking at the percentage of physical, I would say, money and card and digital payments is 80-20 now. So 80% is digital. And we are only growing further. Yes, COVID helped, but all over, I think we are quite well adapted. And the banks really helped as well, because we were one of, I think, the first countries with a very high adoption of mobile phone usage, and with that mobile banking usage. Yeah, 96% currently of all Dutch citizens use their mobile phone. And that's also why you see quite a rapid rise in mobile phone, or let's say mobile payment initiated transactions. And that's also why iDeal came into another rise, because it was very easy actually to add that layer to the basic iDeal payments. So for example, if you had a subscription and you normally would receive an e-invoice through the mail, and you had to sign it and then actually push it back or answer it. Now you simply have a pay by link iDeal offer. You simply pay, you have identified yourself, payment is done, everything fine. So more hybrid payments come into play. So, and now that's the pro side. The con side, or what we of course also get back from let's say other countries in Europe, is we are a very competitive market with an average lower price per transaction, indifferent which payment you talk about, compared to other markets. And that sometimes is challenging where it concerns funding your innovation and funding indeed new, let's say, deploying new segments and new alternatives for payment.
Very good, very good. And my next question, because I want to segue into the European payments ecosystem. And the reason for that is because I noticed just in April that iDeals was quote unquote acquired by the European Payment Initiative.
In the process of. And essentially what the EPI is saying is that they are looking to use it in some form to create a new payment initiative across Europe. Now, I was excited to read this. Not only was it a Hoop Holland moment, but for me, it meant that perhaps there's change underfoot for the European Payment Initiative. Would you mind giving us some insight on that? As a first and foremost, we're of course very happy and enthusiastic about the fact that we have been and are now the chosen partner to actually use as the payment scheme iDeal as a building block to build the EPI system, so the European Payment Initiative, a name to be disclosed later because it's a little bit hard to pay with EPI. iDeal is then easier, but iDeal is not the scheme which, let's say, the scheme name which resonates well in certain markets. So we have to come up with a name, but that's a different discussion. All in all, I think we are really looking forward to that let's say that new company we're building, because we are indeed in the process of being acquired. We're still awaiting closing of the deal, so final closing, and we will also be very, very careful with stepping into the EPI new world, although better, more advanced as we believe from a payment proposition, because there are some additional functionalities to which we as iDeal do not have currently. But as we are a critical infrastructure in the Netherlands, we have to be careful, because otherwise all Dutch consumers have an issue paying with their so beloved iDeal. So only when EPI, with our, of course, dedication and support and let's say day-to-day cooperation and collaboration. Only when we achieve a certain stage where we say, guys, now API is really suit for purpose for all segments which we support in the Dutch market for iDeal, then we start a migration. But all in all, we are, let's say, we are very positive that we were allowed to onboard this journey, and also thanks to our shareholders who really looked at from a long-term perspective. Because if you would have looked only short-term, you say, let's stick to iDeal. But if you want to compete long-term with the international schemes, but also with, let's say, the big tech environment we face, then only collectively we actually can cope with that. So we really do hope that we can be a strong basis, but we will build a new, even stronger API together.
Fantastic. Daniel, thank you so much for your time and joining me on this podcast.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.